Welcome back and thank you for staying with us. Now, the Johannesburg City Manager's job is on the line. Floyd Brink gets to keep his job for now. That's after the city filed an application for leave to appeal a finding that his appointment as City Manager was unconstitutional, unlawful and invalid. The City Council has experienced disruptions in leadership for most of this year, and this affects governance of the city and public-private partnerships that actually keep the city going. Let's find out more now from Stephen Preez, the founder of Localabode. Thank you so much, Stephen, for your time here on eNCA. So you are, a part of the public-private partnership with government in the city of Joburg, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, we are. Yes,
for services, especially with cleaning the streets of Johannesburg, right?
It's cleaning, it's the safety, security, the greening. They're making it pretty.
That is very important for a world-class African city, the economic hub of the entire continent, right? So are we correct as Joburg residents when we look at Johannesburg and we're thinking the services aren't exactly up to par? Are we being unfair, or is this true of what's been happening lately at least?
I think there has been a slow decline, particularly over the past, I would say, 18 to 24 months. And I think a lot of it is driven by the political instability of the city. Very often what we find is we'll start working with city officials, MMCs, the mayors and the like, all get on the same page about a plan, only to find that a month down the line when it comes to implementation, the upper echelons have changed and everybody comes in with their own ideas, wanting to create their own legacy. So we start the whole process again. So the instability doesn't help the situation at all.
And it's okay to want to create your own legacy, but not at the expense of the residents. So how important is a city manager when it comes to companies like yours to actually help keep the city going?
It's extremely important in our lives. He's very much involved on a day-to-day basis with us. We find throughout working with the city, you work with the city-owned entities, you deal with your city powers, your Joburg waters, at depot level and people on the ground, but very often things will be above them. There'll be some issues that are above their pay grade, so to speak, where you then need someone like the city manager to step in to try and overcome the deadlock that often occurs. We've often got budget constraints. So how does the city deal with 2,000 potholes in an area when they've only got budget to fix 500, which 500 take precedence? So the city manager is very important in that sort of role to balance that out and to make sure that the constituencies that effectively pay and keep the city running with their rates and taxes are looked after.
So, in the 9 months that Floyd Brink in particular has been at the helm as city manager, how have things been going? I'm assuming that there was at least some stability, whether the MECs or the executive of the mayor changes, at least the city manager stayed the same.
He has stayed the same, which we've been grateful for. I think it's been a very tumultuous time for him. He's had to overcome two rather big incidents, which is something we haven't really seen in the city. Exactly. The Lillian Ngoyi explosion and then the fire in Albert Street. There were two very, very unusual occurrences that have happened. It's something that I don't think many people in his position have had to deal with in the past. What has been nice about the way he's dealt with it, he's actually brought the private sector into the solution finding phase. So it hasn't been a case of the city just developing plans, thinking that the people on the ground and the ratepayers will be happy with what they're doing and then just implement. From day one, particularly with something like the Lillian Ngoyi explosion, from day one, the moment the emergency services were off the scene and the scene was deemed to be safe for people to go there, he invited the private property owners who were affected most by that to come down and to be part of the solution, to find a way how we're going to rehabilitate it, what it's going to look like, how it's going to be managed, and what the sustainability is behind it, which is key. Sustainability is often a fact that gets forgotten when, whether it be provincial, local or national government, implement a plan. Very often there's not a sustainability plan that goes behind it. With a city manager in this instance, that's what he's been harping on, is how do we make sure that in 10 years' time, when people talk about the Lillian Ngoyi explosion and they see what's there now, that they can take pride in what they're seeing.
All right, not to sound like now we are on the side of Mr. Brink, etc., but I understand what you're saying. So how much then does council get involved? For instance, especially the mayoral committee, the executive committee of the mayor and the mayor himself? So
what we found is the city manager often is the go-between between the private sector and the MMCs and the mayor in that regard. So very often we'll sit with departmental heads, heads of department, as I say, deputy directors within departments. We'll put plans forward, we'll have meetings, discussions. then through the city manager's office, whoever that person may or may not be, it then gets taken onto the mayoral committees where decisions are taken, because the private sector don't get to sit in the mayoral committee meetings where decisions are made. So we need someone who can either put the argument for or against us in that regard, and that's where we rely heavily on a good city manager to do that.
All right, so it's needed that it's a good city manager. So they are appealing, the city is appealing the decision by the High Court. Initially, they had given the city 10 days to remove him. So are you concerned not only about Floyd Brink, possibly, we don't know what the court is going to decide after this appeal, the leave to appeal is either granted or not granted, besides him as an individual? Are you worried at all that there won't be stability in the city of Johannesburg to a point where you can get, whether it's him or another, city manager that can be at the helm for longer than 9 months?
It is a big concern for us. We've had so much instability at the executive level within the city, as I say, which has led to many of the private sector not wanting to invest in the city anymore. When you don't have sustainability, or stability at least, you don't have investment. And the city and government keep pushing that there needs to be private sector involvement, more in government and in government projects. But the private sector won't put money into something if there's no stability behind it. And whether it's Floyd or whether it's somebody else, we need some sort of stability. We need an environment where it's conducive for people to invest and to try and fix effectively what's going backwards at the moment.
Yeah, for you to be able to spend your money, to have the appetite to spend your money, right? So, but like, what's the appetite like now? What are the talks between you as a private sector? I guess I'm trying to ask, is there still the view that it's a world-class African city, and is business still willing to assist government to fix it after the tumultuous 24 months we've had in this city?
So, over the past 6 months, we've had many big businesses who traditionally would have stood on the outside shouting inwards and telling everyone what the problems are. A few months ago, a big grouping of them got together, and I won't go into detail as to who at this stage, but a big grouping of them got together and decided, instead of shouting from the sidelines, was to roll their sleeves up and get involved with the city. They pitched the idea to various MMCs, the mayor and the city manager at the time, which was Floyd, and it was very well received from the public sector. They wanted to work with the private sector. MOUs have subsequently been signed and entered into to find that relationship now where the private sector are saying, we want to be involved. We realize you might not have all the expertise or the budgets to get to the city to where it needs to be. We as the private sector will make specialists available, we'll make funds available where we can, and work together to try and turn things around in the city, predominantly starting with the inner city, in fact.
And the type of pushback that you get from politicians, for instance, I want to ask you a personal question. We hear a lot about kickbacks, how the private sector eventually gets involved in government projects. Does this really happen in real life?
So at the levels that we deal with, and when I say that, at the levels of MMCs, at the levels of the mayor and the like, we yet to come across that.
Okay.
I'm not to say it doesn't happen at lower levels, guys on the ground, regional heads or whatever the case may be. We haven't come across that, and I can tell you now that the private sector will not, particularly the clients that we represent and the guys who want to fix the city, won't even entertain that. If you ever want to get the private sector to turn away from a deal, particularly where they're giving money and not getting something in return, if they're going to put in hundreds of millions to fix a bridge or to fix a road, there's no direct benefit to them. They're going to walk away from it.
All right. Well, thank you so much
for
your time and for coming into studio. And you might notice I use the words in real life. We all know what the state capture report did say, but of course that was on a national level where Stephen is not really involved just yet. That was Stephen du Preez, founder of Localabode.